and see how we go. My name's Laverne Lehman and I'm a member of the ASA National Committee, and I'm the host for this evening. The first thing I'd like to do though is acknowledge our traditional owners. For me, our event is being held on the lands of the Watchabaluk, Jawa, Jawa Jali, Jabagolk and Wagaya people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be present today. And I'd also like to acknowledge that they are my roosters that are going off in the background there, so don't worry about that. Before we get into what I hope will be a really fascinating session, I'll just do a quick introduction of AFSA and some basic online etiquette. So I'll confess I'm a relatively new committee member, having only joined the committee last October, and this is the first solidarity session that I'm actually hosting. The session will be recorded and shared, so if you have any concerns about the recording being shared, please let us know. We also ask everyone to leave cameras and mics off until the Q&A. Having said that, because there's so few people involved here, it's probably less important this time around than usual. And we do welcome questions during the course of the conversation as well. In terms of, if you don't know what AFSA is, the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance is an organisation that represents small-scale farmers and works to create a food system that is democratic, ethical and ecologically sound. I would recommend that you take a look at our website and have a look at the work we do and the amazing group of people who are involved in it all. But what we're here for today is to hear from Ellie Smith from Lock the Gate. So for me, Lock the Gate is one of those organisations that I constantly hear things about, probably through a lot of social media, but other media that I listen to. And not infrequently, they're in the news. And as I said, across my social media feeds, they've certainly been very good at getting their message out there in the last few years. So let's kick the session off with Ellie. So firstly, welcome Ellie, and thank you for taking some time to talk to us about Lock the Gate this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'd like to acknowledge the Jinnabara, Turrbal and Gurunga people of the land that I'm on.
Thank you. Look, perhaps if we can just kick it off with, can you just give us a bit of background history of Lock the Gate and what inspired Lock the Gate in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So Lock the Gate has been around for 10 years now. We had our 10-year anniversary last year, and it started when a bunch of farmers, mostly in New South Wales, were dealing with massive expansions of coal mines, all through the Hunter Valley in particular, and then they got together or started hearing about these farmers in Queensland who were dealing with a huge expansion of the coal seam gas industry, or the inception of the coal seam gas industry, basically, in Australia. And they decided that a national alliance was needed. You know, they were fighting on all of these different fronts individually, and yeah, there was this need for a national alliance that could kind of push back against the kind of political power that the coal and gas industry has in the country. So they really started that, and environmentalists were there right from the start, and traditional owners as well, who were you know, all fighting separately, but against the same industries. And so we decided to put all of our differences aside and, you know, kind of maybe block our ears to some of the things that we would usually disagree on, and come together for this, you know, I guess the greater good and this bigger purpose that was going to defeat us all if we didn't form an alliance. So that was kind of the start of Lock the Gate, and I was on the periphery then. I wasn't really involved with Lock the Gate back in those days. but it's really developed over the 10 years into a national alliance with a presence that, you know, some of you would know about in Victoria, and, you know, big campaigns now in the Northern Territory and Western Australia, and fortunately we've had some wins in South Australia, so we're not super active in South Australia, but yeah, having had a big win recently in Victoria, and that was really led by another organisation, Friends of the Earth, down there, but in alliance with the kind of the work of Lock the Gate. We've seen a ban on fracking in Victoria, which is pretty amazing, and you know, like we've still got the coal industry, we've still got the gas industry, we've still got a big job to do, but I think some would say unholy alliance of traditional owners, farmers and environmentalists have seen a lot of wins over the last 10 years in terms of like what the industry was planning to do and what they've been able to do.
How have you managed to keep those alliances together? I mean, as you said, it's quite a disparate group of different people. How has that managed to work so well over 10 years? That's an extraordinary amount of time in this day and age when people's attention spans are so short. To keep people, you know, within that framework that you've got so well established with Lock the Gate.
Yeah, I mean, one question is how we manage to keep that alliance together, and it's often difficult. I mean, I come from the city. I grew up on the Sunshine Coast. I studied environmental management at school, at uni, and I, you know, became this like climate activist coming out of university, and very focused on the climate issue. And so I guess kind of my story is similar to a lot of the other environmentalists who are involved with the organisation, where, you know, we consciously decided that it was more important to work in solidarity with people on the ground than to like necessarily fight every fight to do with climate change. And and I mean, I started going out and talking to landholders in central Queensland kind of before I had this idea of the land use conflict. I was interested to go out to Emerald and Clermont and Moranbah, like these big mining towns, and find out on the ground what people thought about the mining industry, because I knew that basically needed to stop. And, you know, I wanted to know what the impacts were going to be on those communities. And in the process of that, you know, had farmers reaching out to us saying like, oh, you know, we've been trying to fight this for such a long time, and really fighting on an individual basis in the legal arena, which obviously, you know, mining companies and gas companies are going to win in the legal arena, because they can just outgun you every time. And so they were so keen to see these young people who cared about these issues coming out and actually interested in their issues, and they were willing to put all of their issues aside, and so it just made sense to start building those alliances. And then you build the relationships, and that's what it's all based on in the end. And some of these fights that we've been having, like around the Ackland mine in the Darling Downs, and lots of projects in New South Wales, you know, they've been going on for 10 years or more, you know, longer than 10 years in some cases. And so you build these really strong relationships with people, and you know, you just don't even, you know, it just makes sense to be have to continue to have these strong alliances.
I took a good look at your website, because, as I said, I've heard about Lock the Gate, and your media stuff I think is fantastic. It certainly gets out there. But I noticed your work's based on some pretty solid principles. Can you tell us a bit more about those principles and how they were developed?
Yeah, sure. So I have we have a great set of principles that are on the website that I don't remember off the top of my head.
That's all right.
But I think that the principles that that I was kind of alluding to before was that idea of working together, whether it's across regional and city divides or within a community. And the only way really that we have had any success in anywhere in the country has been when regional people stand together. If you look at an area like the Pilliga Forest in New South Wales, where the Santos gas project wants to go into the Pilliga Forest, they obviously, and they did it in Queensland as well, they want to go into the state forest first because all they have to do is negotiate with the state government. But the community there saw them coming, saw that there was that they were going for the weakest link, which was the state forest, and said, we know you're coming for us next. And they went out and surveyed the entire community out surrounding that Pilliga Forest, and have basically said, you may get your approval to get into the Pilliga Forest, and we're going to fight that every step of the way, but you're not coming onto the land outside of the forest. And frankly, we're not going to let you into the forest in the first place. And so we have this process that's been developed by kind of campaign after campaign. It started in northern New South Wales, where it was just locking up. We realised pretty soon that locking the gate wasn't enough. You had to lock up a region because a gas company can just pick you off one after the other. But if a community stands together and says, we just don't want you here at all, then basically they give up and go away and they go somewhere else. And in northern New South Wales, that's what they did. They went and developed this survey process where they would go and talk to every single person on their door about whether or not they wanted gas fields in the region. More often than not, it's over 90, usually 99% of people that do that survey say, no, we don't want a gas field or a coal mine in the region. And then, having done the community engagement for the government and for the industry, we go to the decision makers and say, look, we've taken a vote basically, and we say we don't want it here. And if you get in early enough, then the companies go away. Often, you don't get in early enough, and then it becomes a big fight, and you use other tactics. But basically, that principle of standing together as a community is the thing. It's the bedrock of any campaign. We also, we have strong principles around non-violence, and it just makes sense that that we don't do the kind of bullying and intimidation tactics that the companies are so willing to do. We work together and we build alliances, and we work peacefully within the community.
Fine.
How many did I get?
No, that's fine. I shouldn't provide questions like that. Look, if anyone wants to look at the principles, they're on the website. They are a pretty good read, actually. Yeah. The other thing, I mean, you sort of alluded to it a little bit, and it's one of the things that I find constantly fascinating in our politics these days, is the tension between the city and the rural regional divide in the city. We often hear about, particularly in the left side of politics, I guess, where there seems to be more focus on environmental issues anyway, but there's often that tension between what they call inner city latte drinking lefties compared to what rural and regional people want. Now, I live in a rural regional area, and by and large, the politics is quite right wing where I live. I know that's not the case everywhere, but I'm interested into how, if those sorts of tensions play out in Lock the Gate at all, when you're looking to build those relationships, because the power, let's face it, the power base in a lot of these areas is in the cities. With these big corporations within the politicians and so forth as well. And it's much, I know from my own perspective, we often feel it's much harder for regional areas. It might not be the case in Queensland either, I might add, but certainly where I live, we often feel like we get quite forgotten at times. So I'm kind of interested in how that tension might play out with you, or is it that not an issue?
Yeah, I mean, it does play out in a lot of different ways. And yeah, I think the alliance of, within Lock the Gate really does break down some of those tensions anyway, inherently, because we aren't a bunch of people from our office is now in West End, which I think is hilarious. But it's only just me and the media and our media person who sits in that office. Our base is in regional areas, and so really, we're there and we can activate people who care about these issues for completely different reasons. But our strong base and all of our messaging is kind of targeted at regional people. And I mean, I just think that divide is really over-egged, and like they try to fuel the fire of that divide to keep us separated, because like anybody who goes and speaks to farmers like you guys knows that their environment, where they live, their community is the most important thing to them, and so it's just a non-issue basically when you go out talking about these issues that they care about, that we care about. It all fades into insignificance. But unfortunately, the zeitgeist of at the moment is that people in Western Queensland especially, they don't care about climate change, and they're wrecking the country and blah blah blah, and all they want is jobs. I mean, yes, they want jobs, but they want sustainable long-term jobs, and they want to protect the land that they've lived on for generations, for the generations to come. And so it's definitely just I think that divide is it's just false a lot of the time.
Yep, fair enough. No, that's interesting. I agree with you. I don't think it actually exists, but it's always interesting when you listen to media that it comes out that way. And from certain politicians too, I might add, who like to play on it. You talked about doing a survey or talking to the community very early on in a campaign, and why that's so important. Has that changed? Like, you've been around for 10 years. Has that approach changed, or were you doing that right at the beginning, or have you worked out over time that getting in there and connecting with the community early on is really the way to go? Is that something you've learned along the way, or?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've learned along the way. I think every different campaign learns from the next one, or from the previous one, and so we've definitely learned that. And and I guess when I explained it before, it seemed like it was like Lock the Gate is doing this and Lock the Gate is learning this, but whenever we do a survey, it's like it's the community going out and doing a survey. And we had a case, a group, we have a group that is working in their community in central Queensland at the moment. And they were about to do the survey. They'd heard from us and seen that it had worked down the road in the Wide Bay. And so they were ready to do the survey, and then COVID hit. And so I was like, oh, how are we going to go around doing door knocking in the middle of COVID? And so they adapted. One of the key members of that group is the postie. So she delivered the survey to everybody in town, and then they made a phone tree basically and called everybody to talk it through. It's basically like, do you need any more information? What do you reckon? And then they picked up the survey at the end of a few weeks, and yeah, similar. I mean, this is an interesting community because they have 2 coal mines on either side of them. Already there's some people in the town who are employed in the mines, and there's a coal mine proposed on a floodplain, the floodplain of the Dawson River. Really good irrigated cropping country, and then some areas that are that young families are doing amazing regenerative agriculture on, and yeah, it's a kind of place where, so the community of 300 came back with a survey of, I think, 97% saying we don't want the mine, and it's just a mine that's in the wrong place. It just shouldn't be going onto floodplains of rivers. And so, yeah, I mean, that was an example of us learning, and the communities learning from other communities, and then having an organisation like Lock the Gate Alliance, which we have quite a small staff, given the fact that we work across the entire country and fight basically every gas and coal mine in the country. But yeah, we can only do that because there's communities like that who actually do the work.
Yeah, no, I think certainly in the last 12 months, we've all learned different ways of having to go about doing things. And Nick's put a comment in their campaign priority, recruit the postie. I think is something that we can all take note of there. It's
and the women. It's always the women that run these campaigns.
Yeah, well, those that talk a lot in town. I know, go to the hairdresser. That's where I find out everything that's going on in my town. It's the only way I hear all the local gossip. So yeah, go to those people that actually do and recruit those people that talk to others an awful lot. So there's lots of different ways of going about these sorts of things. I think that's really useful when you think about it, but not just the traditional way of doing campaigns. Why do you think movements like Lock the Gate are so important? And I'm sure you probably really already answered this, but perhaps
it kind of sprung to mind. When you were saying that about the hairdresser, because, well, that survey process in particular, we usually find that like most people don't want to say that they're against a coal mine or a gas field in their community. Like they wouldn't come out to a protest or be really vocal about it, because of all of the things that we've talked about. But when, in the privacy of their home, they're given that question, do you want it here? Do you want it here in your backyard? They all say no. And then when you give, when you hand over those results back to the community and say, well, like 99% of you don't want it, then it just suddenly becomes okay to say, like suddenly the hairdresser isn't kind of saying it under her breath, but she's actually saying, everybody else is going to agree with me if I say this. So that's that power of having that community survey. It's just such a valuable tactic right at the start of a campaign. But yeah, in terms of like the alliance itself, I just think it's been such an important organisation to break down that rural and city divide, and give communities a feeling of empowerment that they can stop something. I'm working with a community at the moment who have a gas field proposed, and they're in central Queensland, where the gas industry, the gas industry has basically run roughshod over most of southern Queensland already, and this community thinks that they're next, basically, and they don't think that they can do anything about it. And they just kind of say to me, like, why are you here? Why are we bothering? And I say, the reason that I'm here is because you're all here. Like, every single farmer in that proposed gas field was sitting around the table. They were all willing to talk to each other and work together. And, we just can't help like one individual landholder, but if there's a community that are willing to get together, then then it's worth putting our energy into it. And the thing that we have is the support of our base of supporters who put their donations in every month, and my time to go through all of the legal and bureaucratic stuff around those approvals, and try and pick holes in these proposals, and do the media stuff that you see all the time, and do the social media stuff, and give us that edge, and help support that community. But basically we couldn't do it without them. Like, if they don't all believe in the fact that they can actually fight it, then there's nothing that all of the media and social media in the world can do. But it is, it's also vital.
Yeah, it must be very empowering for those small communities if they go through all of this and get a positive result like that they find that they didn't believe that they could do anything, but it turns out that they actually can. Do you ever see that it translates into something more for that community down the track as well, that they've discovered that they actually have the power to do things and make change that perhaps they didn't realise?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can give examples from Queensland because that's where I work, but I know that it happens all over the country, but I just don't, haven't had those relationships. But in the Wide Bay, so it's kind of between like Hervey Bay, Bundaberg and Maryborough, there was a big, gas exploration proposed there. It was like very early days. So the government all just said, oh, don't worry, like probably won't even go ahead anyway. And the gas industry was saying, oh, we don't have to do consultation because, it's just lines on a map for us at this point. And the community really got together and did this massive project. Oh, it took 5 years, it's a big area. And they were doing, town after town, declaring themselves gas free, and often it was the towns, it wasn't the big landholders. And then finally towards the end, the big landholders like the macadamia farmers and the cane farmers, sweet potato farmers got on board with the campaign, and they started agitating through their peak bodies as well, and like they were kind of at fever pitch. And then finally the straw that broke the camel's back was that the traditional owners, the Butchulla, who had previously signed off on exploration and Ilua, where before anybody knew what shale gas fracking was, they had signed off on it. That was coming up for renewal, and they had been seeing all of this stuff going on with the rest of the community, and decided that with a lot of amazing agitation from some really awesome activists within the Butchulla community, that they wouldn't renew that native title, the ILUA, which officially, you know, the government and the company told them they weren't allowed to not renew it, but they said, you know, what are you going to do about it? And the company backed off and said that they would go away. So it was a massive win. It was a 5-year campaign, and since then, you know, there's a lot of things that have come out of that. They're amazingly well networked. You know, the cane farmers and the local community talk to each other a lot more than they ever did before. Yeah, there's just a lot less tension, and you can talk. You know, we can go in there and talk sensibly about all sorts of things. But then, I mean, a crazy coal company decided to propose a coal mine right in the middle of the fertile soils of around just outside of Bundaberg. And the community knew exactly what to do. You know, they were so ready to just stop that project in its tracks. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, Fox Resources thinks that they're still going to build this coal mine, but it's just never going to happen because the community is just so, you know, 100% on board. They're already put petitions to the state government, and you know, nobody's letting the company on for doing anything, you know, biodiversity surveys or just nothing. It's not going to happen. So yeah, and then it doesn't have to be that. It can be a bike track. Like there's a, just outside of Noosa, there was a project proposed, and so the kind of Koran Noosa folks started getting really involved in the campaign, and they got rid of the exploration permits that were outside of their town, and now they're campaigning together to get better bike tracks. There's you know, like a community solar project. There's you know, they're trying to stop a quarry. You know, they're totally organized and ready to do absolutely anything after that.
Yeah, that's a great outcome and a great story. Look, my final question before I open it up to others who might have some other questions. So given the success of a movement like Lock the Gate, what advice would you give to community grassroots organisations that want to make a change? Now, I know you've talked about things like networking and communication, but I guess anything else you'd like to add to what you've already said there that gives people some food for thought, and then we'll take some questions from the participants.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm interested in the context that you guys are working in. And so I think, like, you know, some of the things that we've learned are that when you're trying to get media, they just want like new news, and you have to get more and more and more into the detail. We have to have a new report or something like that. But when you're actually trying to get the word across to the community and to like a broad cross-section of a local community, the message needs to be really clear and repeated a lot of times. So often you have to kind of work on both of those fronts, and it's quite difficult. But yeah, that's one of the things that we've learned. And you know, and we support people to use the legal process as well, and we just work really closely with the Environmental Defenders Office. They do such an amazing job, and yeah, it's like it's this kind of you know, like this suite of strategies that are available to communities: the media, the social media stuff, the you know, mobilizing, and legal strategies. But it's all really just like, you can't shortcut around that community work. It's just vitally important. And while people are thinking about their questions, is it okay if I just go and turn a light on, because it's getting dark here?
Go for it. So I'll open it up for questions from anybody who wants to ask anything of Ellie now. You might have some other questions. when she gets back from turning on the light. Here she is. So, yeah, please go for it.
Come on, Nick.
You can unmute yourselves now too, by the way.
I'll go while other people think of it. Hey, Ellie, how are you?
Oh, well, thanks. How are you?
Really good. So I missed the very start of this, and I think you might have talked about this, but you talked about your really successful tactics for basically like removing the social license from these jerks, so that they have to go away. And it was really interesting, your comment about getting in there before they did. If you get in early enough and build enough momentum, they'll go away. Have you noticed in the last 10 years, are they getting any smarter in terms of the way they campaign? They seem to spend a lot of resources and time like building structural power, like influencing politicians and things like that. Are they getting any harder to deal with on the ground?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if they are getting harder to deal with. They're just always hard to deal with on the ground. And they have these really intense bullying tactics. So, yeah, I guess when it's left up to a negotiation, just a one-on-one negotiation between the landholder and the company, it's just no chance. It's just relentless. It's absolutely horrible. And so you'll have a lot of people who come up with these, great legal tactics for how you can get around some of the the negotiations, just tie them up and make it as hard as possible. But I haven't seen it work. I know in New South Wales they've done a bit of that, where it's kind of where they've been come in too late with community strategy, and they've had to do a bit of that. But I haven't seen it work, unfortunately, in Queensland. So it's just it's really difficult, and it really relies on people talking to each other. And and it's like, look, the gate didn't invent that idea, and certainly even with fighting coal mines and gas fields, people were doing it long before Lock the Gate came around. It's just that we've kind of got this infrastructure now that we can share that with other communities who are facing it for the first time now.
You're doing great work, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ellie, I wanted to ask you, you talked about the importance of working with traditional owners and kind of how critical that's been in building the alliances that Lock the Gate has. Do you have any, I guess, advice or experiences that are useful in terms of approaching traditional owner groups to build those relationships and build those alliances?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been doing this for quite a while, and I am definitely still learning how to do that right. And one of the things that I just learned recently, which, like, I just feel like I'm just, such a whitey idiot sometimes, but it's like, we often feel like we don't want to burden traditional owners with having to work on their campaign by going in and saying, hey, did you know, like, there's a gas field proposed for this area, and is it, what do you think about that? I often feel like I want to do all of my homework and make sure I know exactly, all of the intervention points, and then go in there and make it as easy as possible for them to do it. Because I know that they've got so much other shit going on. And maybe they don't even want to know us anyway. So one of the things that I've learned recently is that is just like not an appropriate way to work with traditional owners. and that going early and, you know, just talking about the issues and building the relationship early on is the most important thing to do to start. I mean, yeah, like that, the campaign with in the Wide Bay, we kind of like coincidentally got in touch with the bachelor. So Gemma, who is a bachelor elder, she grew up in northern New South Wales on Bunjalung country, and so she had been involved with the big campaign in the northern New South Wales against the gas industry. And then she was like, you know, she saw one of our t-shirts that's got like the map of Australia and all of the gas wells, and she's like, oh, I think that's coming a bit close to my country up there in up near Fraser Island. And so she was kind of making inquiries about it, and then one of the local groups was having an event and wanted to have somebody do a welcome to country, and that's how they connected. And you know, suddenly it was like match made in heaven, and so just like perfect timing, and worked so well together. But yeah, like often it's difficult to just start those relationships, and yeah, feel like you're not burdening people.
Yeah. So where would you say that you did start if it wasn't like an organic relationship that just developed? Like,
yeah, there's like the prescribed native title bodies. There's you know, just depending on where you are geographically, just finding out who the traditional owners are, and just making inquiries with the folks out of Baralaba that I was talking about. Just down the road is the Warrabinda Aboriginal community and Aboriginal council, and so yeah, it was like, okay, well, let's go and see who's there and who's interested in this stuff, and from that, you know, there's been a few relationships formed around totally different projects, like, you know, gas fields in totally different places, because, you know, there's this I guess congregation, you know, of different native nations who are based there in Warrabinda. So yeah, it's really different depending on different places, and yeah, and I think you know, there's also this challenge around native title laws, and just the fact that they're basically pretty useless for most Aboriginal people, and yeah, so we can't necessarily get in touch with the right people using that framework.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, thanks.
It's certainly a difficult area. I work for a traditional owner organisation, and even when you've got native title and that's all very clear cut, it's never clear cut.
Yeah.
So have we got anyone else that's got any other questions? No?
Well, I'm kind of interested because in what you guys do and where it might like intersect with what Lock the Gate does, because we definitely find that small family farms are, you know, they're the ones that have like lots of skin in the game, and they're ready to, you know, they'll fight for their patch. It's much harder if you've, well, yeah, almost basically impossible if you've got a big corporate that owns a whole bunch of land, and managers don't feel like they have any say over what happens with, you know, negotiations around access and that kind of thing. So yeah, kind of interested, has it come up as an issue for like folks in your membership, and yeah, or like what are the kind of cross sections that might be there that we can work together on more.
Is there anyone who'd like to address that? I'm probably not the best person to do that in this case.
I'll address that. Look, I'd love to see AFSA do more working with organisations like Lock the Gate, because you know, we've got such a broad area of focus as an organisation. I mean, we campaign on international issues. You know, we've got a seat at the table at the UN Food and Agriculture Organisation through La Via Campesina, right through to like doing really practical stuff like representing folks with pastured poultry farms who are having trouble with local government organisations and things like that. But like, I think the answer to a lot of our members' problems would be to build some permanent campaigning capacity, like what you described was built in the Wide Bay area, where, you know, it doesn't so much matter what the issue is. We've got those ongoing strong collectives that we can draw on to deal with anything that arises. So, like, you know, these solidarity sessions we've been doing, where we've been talking to a whole bunch of other organisations in these public conversations, I think are the first step towards building that. But yeah, I'm really excited about what we might be able to achieve linking up with organisations like Lock the Gate. And I mean, plus we've got a whole bunch of members of AFSA who are also active in Lock the Gate around the nation. So there's already an intersection there as well, I guess.
Yeah, we do find that actually that, you know, whether it's like, you know, we kind of focus on coal and gas, although we're looking more at working on, you know, positive regional development solutions. But there's other organisations like, you know, Farmers for Climate Action and Solar Citizens and you guys, where like we do find that the overlap happens, or, you know, people kind of graduate from one to another, whether which direction it goes in, no one knows. But it's, yeah, and even unions, you know, like you've got people who have had that activist background in their workplaces, and then they get involved with Lock the Gate because they see that threat in their backyard. So yeah, it's definitely kind of interesting and already happening, and maybe we just can you know, formalize it in some way, in the way that we could kind of talk to each other and make sure that people are feeding into different organisations.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's probably how we activate that as a practical outcome, not just talking about it, but yeah, how we actually funnel that into some real action where we need to, and support each other, I guess, down the track. I think there's always power in that. I think we've probably just about got to the end of our session here. I've got to say a couple more things. So a reminder that AFSA is a membership organisation, so our voice comes from our members, and we can do what we do because our members stand together. So I guess just reinforcing what we were just saying, we encourage you to join the food sovereignty movement in Australia as an AFSA member. So you can check us out at afsa.org.au and lend your voice to supporting food sovereignty in Australia, and potentially other organisations like Lock the Gate down the track. And finally, our next session, our next solidarity session is on the 7th of April. We'll be talking to Friends of the Earth about emerging tech in ag, such as gene editing and digital ag, and why this isn't the right pathway to achieve ethical democratic food systems. So if we can invite everyone to join us for that one as well, that would be great, and tell all your friends and get a bit more of a crowd next time. From me, thank you. This is my first time hosting this, so it's a pleasure having you, Ellie. Thank you so much for spending your time this evening. I hope your son's fine next door with his audio book.
No, yeah, my partner did arrive at one point and he is being cared for, thankfully. But thanks so much for your time as well and your interest. And yeah, looking forward to what comes out of it.
And thank you all to coming to listen this evening. I hope you all got something out of the session. I know I certainly did. I learned a lot more about Lock the Gate than I did before, so I knew before. So that was excellent. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
Okay, thank you.